today's video, I'm gonna go through the settings I use on my Fujifilm cameras at nighttime to achieve the look I want and the look you probably see on my more cinematic videos. Fortunately, Fujifilm's camera settings have remained pretty consistent throughout the years, so whichever Fujifilm camera you have, hopefully this episode will be helpful to you too. The first thing I should note is, when it comes to recording video, I always try to do so in the highest quality possible. Unlike with photography, when it comes to video, you don't have nearly as much freedom to edit in post. With photography, if you underexpose the image or you slightly blow out the highlights, it's pretty easy to bring it into post and edit it and correct it. With video, you don't have that luxury, so capturing your video in the highest quality with the most data possible really does make a difference. Now first up, I'm going to head into the video quality settings. Now usually I'm at 4K 25p. Next up, I always shoot at H.265 on 422. Also, if the camera allows it, I always go for all intro. Next up is the megabytes per second. For this setting, I always use the highest one available. Now this can differ depending on the Fujifilm camera you're shooting on. For example, on the X100VI, I think the maximum is 200 megabytes per second, whereas on the XH2S you can go above 700. Also, I always capture all of my footage at 10-bit. This just allows your camera to capture more color data, and again, as I said earlier, it just makes editing in post easier. Also, I always try to shoot in f-log2. When you shoot in log, it records your video with less saturation and less contrast and preserves more of the dynamic range, and this just makes it easier to edit in post. If you're using any of Fujifilm's film simulations when you're recording video, it is going to be a lot more difficult to edit in post, simply because a lot of the contrast and colors are already baked into the footage. So where possible, I shoot with f-log2. If that's not available, I shoot in f-log, and if that's not available, I shoot in Eterna. It's worth noting, when you film in f-log2, your camera's base ISO will be 1000. So this isn't a problem at nighttime. If anything, it's a bit of an advantage, but if you're shooting at daytime, it can become problematic because your scenes can quickly become overexposed. So when you're shooting at daytime, you probably will need an ND filter if you're shooting on f-log2. At nighttime, you don't have to worry about it too much, but do keep an eye on those highlights because some scenes at nighttime can be really bright. Finally, I like to bring down the sharpness and noise reduction slightly. Both of these features can be added in post, so in DaVinci or Final Cut or wherever you edit, it's pretty easy to bring in both noise reduction and sharpness, whereas if they're already baked into the image, you can't take it away. Okay, so next up is the exposure triangle. This is your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. When it comes to your shutter speed, this one's fairly simple. You keep it at double your frame rate. So if your frame rate is 24 frames a second, then you set your shutter speed at 48th of a second. If your frame rate is 25, you set your shutter speed at a 50th. Setting the shutter speed at double your frame rate allows the camera to capture movement naturally. There are some certain instances where it does work to move your shutter speed up or down, but for the most part, keep it at double your frame rate. As for my ISO, as I'm shooting at f-log2, it starts at 1000. Usually when I'm shooting at nighttime, this is actually enough, but if it's a really dark scene, I have no issue going up anywhere from 3200 up to 6400. I find the noise pattern on Fujifilm to actually look pretty nice, and if anything, I feel those higher ISOs work better in video than they do for photography. But for the most part, I set the ISO at the base level, so depending on your camera, that can be 1000 or 1250 for f-log2. I think for normal f-log it's 640, so whatever the base is, I start there, and if it's a really dark scene, I move it up. When it comes to aperture, as I'm shooting at nighttime, I tend to keep it as low as possible. So if I'm shooting with an f1.4 lens, I'm shooting at f1.4. If it's an f2.8 zoom, I'm shooting at f2.8. Keeping your f-stop low simply allows more light to get into your lens and makes it easier to shoot at nighttime. So when it comes to white balance, I actually find Fujifilm cameras do a pretty good job at automatically selecting the white balance. For years, I've been using auto white balance on Fujifilm cameras and very rarely run into issues. However, in recent months, I have begun setting my white balance at 3200 when shooting at nighttime. This just gives my footage more of a blue-green tint, but for the most part, and if you're new to shooting at nighttime, I'll just stick with recording video on auto white balance. I tend to use single point autofocus when recording at nighttime. I'm usually shooting static scenes, so I have time to lock in my autofocus and compose my scene before hitting the record button. When it comes to continuous autofocus, I find it to be a bit unreliable on Fujifilm cameras, and sometimes it leads to the lens hunting or just going a bit crazy. So I steer clear of continuous autofocus when it comes to video. And when it comes to manual, I find Fujifilm lenses aren't the best at manual focusing. Some third-party lenses and some of Fujifilm's older lenses are actually really good for manual focusing. But yeah, I find the single point to be pretty reliable, and for the vast majority of the time I'm out shooting, I'm using that. It's also worth mapping one of the buttons on the back of your camera to back button focus. This will allow you to change your focusing point while you're recording, even if you have single point autofocus selected. Alright, so as for the rest of the settings I use, first up is IBIS. I turn this on mostly when I'm shooting static scenes. If it's a scene where there's going to be a lot of movement, or if I'm on a train or in a car, I like to turn it off, but for the most part I keep that on. Next up is Zebra. I set this at 80%. So what this setting does is, if there's any parts of your image which are overexposed and blown out, they will appear with a zebra pattern over them. This simply allows me to see which of my highlights in the scene are blown out. Next up, and this is actually a pretty important one, it's to turn on movie optimized controls. So for example, if you're using an X-T5 and you have the dial set for your photography settings and you want to quickly switch to video without changing all of your settings again, if you turn on movie optimized controls, you'll remember your video settings and photography settings separately. This makes it much easier and much quicker when it comes to switching between taking photos and recording video on the same camera. Okay, so those are the settings I use to record my video at nighttime. As with most things regarding settings and stuff, there isn't really a right or wrong way to go about them. If you're new to video, there is absolutely nothing wrong with turning everything to auto and just focusing on recording video. But hopefully these settings will help you on your future shoots. And if you have any questions about the settings I've talked about in this episode, drop them in the comments below and I will try to get back to you. A huge thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.